Flirties. On the show today, we're talking about neurodivergence in dating with our guest, a licensed marriage and family therapist specializing in working with late diagnosed neurodivergent individuals and couples. We're going to explore the strengths of neurodiversity today, the challenges, and answer all of your dating questions. Please welcome to the show, Mady Snyder.
Hello. So good to see you today.
Hello, Mady. Nice to see you again. We had a little bit of a meet cute moment in real life a few months ago.
Yeah, we did. And if you describe it as a meet cute, because I'm really about like friendship meet cutes, I would say it was very like picturesque and like hit it off and so fun.
Yes. I was in Los Angeles for my first ever party of sorts for the Sabrina Zohar show, celebrating her 2-year anniversary. And a mutual friend of ours, Chad, who I've gotten to know over the years, said, "Hey, I've got a game night. You want to come?" I said, "Heck yeah."
Yeah, you did.
And that's how we met. And we got to spend that game night in this beautiful place where you practice therapy, working with neurodivergent, late diagnosed individuals and couples. How did you get started in that work? What inspired you?
Yeah, I got started. I mean, I think I got started as a therapist because I'm just like fascinated by human beings and always have been.
Yeah.
And I think I'm really confused too at times. And so it's no surprise to anyone as I, kind of learned more about neurodivergence that I was like, I think this explains my fascination and my confusion.
Okay.
And so I think, that's kind of some of what got me started as a therapist. And then learning about the neurodiversity paradigm, this like movement of folks being like, hey, how about what about if we just viewed all of our brains as like the same way that we view like a thumbprint, how we're all biodiverse, how we each have our own unique thumbprint. What if like maybe our brains were like that too? And so it's not that like having ADHD or autism is necessarily bad. There's certainly things that are like challenging about it. But what if we could just embrace that that's another way of being human? Absolutely. And so that's when it really all clicked for me. And that kind of I discovered that after like grad school and everything, after I knew I already wanted to work with autistic adults and parents and couples and families, that kind of stuff. And that's when it all clicked. And then that kind of like catapulted my career into this other direction. Now I'm doing therapy with people, but I'm also doing like a lot of research and advocacy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I love it. What part of, one thing I'm picking up so far is just curiosity. And I love when we're curious about something and then we follow that, whether it's an interest or a passion, and then we could even turn that into a career. So when it comes to your research, what are some things that you see emerging or maybe topics that you find really interesting?
Yeah, totally. Well, one of them is around dating. Let me tell you.
Oh,
when I first met you and you're like, I'm a flirt coach, I was like, okay, we have to talk because I have a couple of things that I talk about for myself that I've never understood. And one of them was flirting. So I always struggled with like flirting and not understanding it. And I feel like I could count on one hand the number of times I've been intending to flirt and the number of times that people I have thought I was flirting with them is astronomically larger.
Right.
So I think it's such an interesting concept. And I love like the way that you kind of embody flirtiness, if you will. Yeah. But I think like neurodivergence in dating is one of those like emerging things that I am interested in. And I think that like as a lot of more people, as we've like gotten better criteria, more inclusive criteria and expanded it out, and a lot more people are understanding like, hey, this is my identity too. I think that's going to impact the landscape of dating. Yeah. We're also seeing like a lot of trends in dating, like a lot of research is showing like Gen Zers are sober dating. Like that's becoming more popular now, right? Okay. And so I think like even thinking about things like trends around like the ways that we've dated in the past, I think are shifting and evolving.
Yes.
And I think that there's probably like more acceptance and I think inclusivity for folks who maybe are dating differently than others.
I love it. I think so too. And now we've got to have a moment of grounding before we get into all of the dating questions. So many came through. We're definitely going to be talking about flirting, of course, social cues and norms, air quotes here around norms, the sensitivities we can bring into the dating process, particularly with maybe touch and rejection. Lots of questions around communication, showing vulnerability if maybe that feels uncomfortable. But when it comes to neurodiversity, what does that mean?
Great question. It's kind of, I gave a little bit of a teaser as far as like this, the way that I think it can be a helpful way to understand it is like we can understand that biodiversity exists, right? That each of us have a unique makeup biologically, right? And this is essentially saying like neurologically, each of us have our own unique makeup as well. There's a diversity of ways that human minds work.
Yeah.
And then you kind of have, when we talk about the divergencies, you have maybe groups of people whose minds tend to diverge from, I say norm because really norm is just kind of like another, word that's saying here's what's normal and here's what's not, right? So maybe from, you could say like maybe the average or the majority or things like that, right? So you have these people who maybe diverge from like the neuromajority, if you will. And so that's where you have things like ADHD or autism or hearing voices or tics or these kinds of things. We also, like when I say neurodivergent, I'm not just referring to ADHD and autism. There's a lot of other things under that umbrella as well. Yeah. And, there's a lot of like resources around that I'm happy to point people towards. But yeah, it's not just ADHD and autism. It's also like OCD. It can be tics. It can be voice hearing. It can be any kind of presentation that we'd say maybe diverges from the quote unquote norm.
Okay. That's really, really helpful. And we're going to come full circle back to that and tease some resources and share some links in the show notes, because I know there's flirties listening that have an official diagnosis of some kind, or maybe they have been on social media, or they're having conversations with friends, or they're doing some reading, some research of their own on the internet. They're asking Chat GPT, I don't know. And they may be self-diagnosing, or they're identifying with a lot of what they're learning, a lot of what they're seeing and hearing, and observing some things within themselves and being like, wait a second, I feel like I do that too. We have this in common. And so I think it's so helpful when we can put those pieces together. And I think it just empowers you once you realize that there's nothing wrong. There's only what is, and how can we work with who we are and what we've got.
And to kind of tie it back to something you said earlier, I think it's about like, how do we help people feel more of themselves and more in tune with themselves, and realize that like, when you are in tune with that, the rest kind of flows. And I feel like a lot of my work as a therapist is actually helping people feel more in tune with themselves. We've gotten really good at like denying our own intuition and like, yourself, know when something feels off and when something feels right. And so I think more of that, like being able to say, if it's not a hell yes, maybe it's like a no for right now, right? Like, in your body when you're excited about something, when you're like, and when you're having complicated feelings, that doesn't always mean say no, but it means you can listen to that and say like, okay, I'll move forward knowing that something feels a little bit off for right now.
And I think I want to start here at the top talking about some of the strengths of the neurodiverse individual that's out there dating, or maybe they're listening and in a relationship. I think oftentimes we start these conversations, and I know I have, with the struggles, with the problems, with the pain points, and we're going to get there. But first, what are some of the strengths of the neurodiverse individual?
Yeah. And I think, we probably start with those because there's a lot of really real ones, right?
Yes.
And a lot of real challenges, but there's also a lot of like joys, resiliencies, and strengths, like you mentioned. I think some of those are like the deep capacity for emotional attunement. I think about autistic folks, a lot of times you've probably heard these like stereotypes that people, that autistic individuals are like not empathetic or can't pick up on emotions. And while some autistic folks might struggle more with like being able to identify their feeling state or not, oftentimes it's actually an issue of like taking in way too much information and not knowing how to discern between what's relevant or not. And so actually like a lot of autistic folks are actually picking up on a ton of stuff, right? Which means they're super perceptive. They usually have hyperconnected brains that can like link all kinds of ideas and things. It's a really like fun way, I think, of existing in the world, even though there are also challenges. So I think there can be like deep, a lot of perceptiveness, a lot of like emotional capacity to pick up on really subtle things, especially if you've had to get really good at like learning how to mask or learning how to camouflage or like learning when someone's no longer interested in what you're saying. You're really perceptive, right? And if you can kind of like tune into that and know how to use it, that can be a real strength. I think there's also like, I think we talked about this briefly, like this idea that a lot of times the honesty and authenticity can be really refreshing, right? Like being just straightforward and asking for what you want or what you don't want can be really refreshing. I found that for myself when I was dating as well, as I kind of got to this point where I was just like super hyper honest. I would just be like, hey, you're cool. I don't want to waste your time. I don't really see this going anywhere. And people would be like, oh, thanks. Like, that's like, I got a lot, like, you seem very different than a lot of other people I dated, or like a lot of other girls in Los Angeles, or whatever the version of that was. And I think there is a version of that, like, honesty that can be really refreshing. And
definitely
for folks who are tired of the kind of like, oh yeah, I'll get back to you later.
Right.
We'll hang out again. When they're really, what they mean is I'm not interested, or I'm not sure, or I want to keep my options open.
That part too. Yeah. A lot of that directness and honesty. It's refreshing because you don't see a lot of that, or you don't see as much as I would like in the dating world, and even outside, even in friendships, other relationships. Yeah. And we're going to get into some of the kind of cues and things like that happen in dating. But do you identify as neurodiverse?
I identify, as multiply neurodivergent myself.
Okay.
And there's like a lot of, letters we could put behind that, and something that I dive into and have a really sometimes challenging relationship with trying to explain, to people. But there's that's something I identify with myself, and it kind of started with noticing a lot of different sensory sensitivities.
Yes.
And then looking, as I started like getting into assessing others and looking at some of these criterias, and then sending them to family members and being like, hey, everyone keeps telling this story about me from when I was a kid, and this is literally one of the criteria. Like, what do we think about that? Right. Especially for, and again, like there's a lot of like technical terminology we could get into, but if there's anyone out there familiar with the term PDA, which is not public display of affection, it's actually there's another term in the autistic community, which is pervasive drive for autonomy, and that's like folks who have like a really strong sense of like when their autonomy is threatened, that really doesn't feel good for their nervous system. So that's like one example of a really technical term that can, if there's anyone out there listening who's interested in that or who has heard of that term, that can really impact dating as well, having a strong sense of autonomy, but also around wanting to have choice. All kinds of ways. So that was like one of them that I was like, fam, look at this, and they're like, ooh.
I think that might be me. I definitely identify as neurodiverse, and I'm ADHD for sure.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice. Well, then maybe I'll be sending you some of this stuff afterwards, and then you can do your own deep dive.
Please do. I definitely get distracted from time to time, but I definitely also identify with a lot of those few strengths that you just mentioned. And I think one of the other strengths is that of connection. I find that neurodiverse individuals, even though they can get in their head at times, or they may feel overwhelmed or start to mask or detach, and we're going to get into that here in just a moment, I think there's also this real presence where they have an ability to make those deeper connections. There's a curiosity to ask questions, to learn more about the person they're talking to, they're dating, they're connecting with, and nothing, or I don't want to apply blanket statements, but there's that desire to go beyond the superficial, right?
Totally. And I think, like one thing, another strength that I didn't mention, but I just thought about too, is like the connecting over like shared interests. A lot of times neurodivergent folks have these really passionate areas of interest. Like for me, I've been able to create my job out of that area. And that's like something I think you've been able to do too, like follow these passionate areas of interest into something where you're able to kind of create something out of it. But I think that's also like a lot of times ways that someone connects, like a neurodivergent person is going to connect with somebody else over their passionate areas of interest, right?
Absolutely.
And that can be a beautiful strength as well. Even if you have different areas of interest, maybe encouraging in yours, but also being able to like make these connections between things.
Yeah. And lean into these strengths, right? I think too often we shy away from our natural strengths, our natural assets, maybe our natural tendencies in dating, in relationships, in connection. So if you're identifying with any of this so far, recognize these strengths within yourself and lean into it.
Yeah, totally. And like you said, we'll link some stuff at the end. And, I have a lot of stuff on my website for resources as well. But like, lean into it. And I think this like embracing of neurodiversity allows more people to kind of look within themselves and not have this be a label that's negative.
Yes. Yes, I think so too. How about we get into a little flirting now?
Yes. Oh gosh, let's do it.
Because I hear this quite often from a lot of flirties, and definitely those that are neurodivergent, as we're really focusing on neurodivergence today. What are some of the struggles or challenges you think they may have with flirting?
Oh gosh. Okay, my mind is going like 10 different directions right now
Yeah.
how we could talk about this. I will tell you what I wrote down as I was thinking about this. I wrote, what
Okay.
even is flirting? Right?
Mm,
I
mm-hmm,
think that is
mm-hmm,
like something that I think about a lot. And if you like want to share thoughts on that too, that would be
mm-hmm.
awesome. But I think for a lot of people it can feel, well, okay, sorry. For me, my into this was like flirting feels really vague. And it feels
Mm,
kind of like
okay.
I don't know how to
Okay.
understand it. Kind of like I said, I feel like sometimes people would think I was flirting with them and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm just being friendly.
Yeah.
And I had like one friend who described like flirting as not always like as connectivity rather
Mm-hmm,
than just
mm-hmm.
like because you're, looking to connect with someone romantically, but
Yeah.
just like an energy of playfulness about yourself. But I think, when we think about flirting romantically, for a lot of people, it can feel kind of confusing. It can feel
Yeah.
vague. It can feel like, what is it? What is it not?
Yeah.
It can feel performative even, or it can feel like, I think for some people, manipulative. Like, oh, are
Mm-hmm.
you just doing this because you want to get something from
Yeah.
me? So if
Absolutely.
you're a really literal thinker, you might miss some of the like social cues that come with flirting or,
Mm-hmm.
sarcasm, or you might not interpret something as flirting, or you
Right.
might not realize that someone else is interpreting it as flirting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those are all very, very real struggles and challenges. And another one that I hear is eye contact.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think making eye contact is so hard?
Yeah. Well, I started laughing because I think like, eye contact is like one of those things talked a lot about for autistics as far as like the diagnostic criteria. It doesn't feel comfortable for everyone. And for some people, that's not like, again, we don't need to make like blanket statements about every
Mm-hmm.
single autistic person, but
Yeah.
for many of them, eye contact can be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I think like it's not necessary for social interaction to be looking
That's
at
true.
someone's eyes, right?
That's true.
So
Mm-hmm.
then you're having to focus on something that's taking your attention away from, or increasing your anxiety, even taking your attention away from the moment, increasing
Mm-hmm.
your anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting a lot of mental effort into how do I like appear in these socially normed ways,
Yeah.
rather than just like being like, how do I show up as myself?
Yes.
And so I think that's what comes up when I think about like eye contact. And I also think about, like a lot of people have learned to mimic or kind of fake eye contact in different ways. Maybe they look at a space between your eyes, or maybe they, I don't know, force themselves to, and it feels really uncomfortable. I'm also thinking about how when I first moved to LA, like I came from a really small town. So when I would like walk, to the grocery store, I would smile at people and make eye contact with them. And then I learned that like for a lot of people, that's how you initiate flirting, right? Like if you're at a crowded place and you're like giving someone the eyes, I would just be like, hey. And so I think stuff like that, there's like all these kind of like norms around dating too, where eye contact comes into play.
Yeah. That's all really, really good and helpful, because I'm definitely guilty of I feel like I'm an eye contact pusher at times, right? I'm like, you want to initiate the flirt, or you want to express interest in someone non-verbally, catch their attention, right? It's all about that eye contact.
Yeah.
But if that feels uncomfortable for you, or maybe it feels unsafe in your body, or just doesn't come naturally, that's okay. That's okay. You don't have to rely or necessarily bring eye contact into your social interactions, your connections, your flirting. And I hear some of those same, I'll say, difficulties as well, where it's like picking up on some of those social cues around sarcasm, right? Is someone being funny? Are they being literal? I'm not sure.
Are they being mean?
Yeah. Yeah. This idea of, is someone just, do they want something from me? Like, is there maybe an agenda there? And so I hope to dispel a lot of that and help the flirties, neurodivergent and otherwise, get out of their head, into their heart, more so feel their way through the flirt and feel their way through their connections. Bring your natural strengths into this practice and think about how you connect with maybe friends or family, or a neighbor or coworker, when they're relatively more or less low stakes. There's not that romantic interest or perhaps intention there. There's not that attraction if that's present for you. And how do you show up in those experiences, in those situations? Replicate that.
Yeah, totally. And I
Yeah.
think like coming back to this thing you said about like eye contact and like that being it's like it is a tool, it's not the only tool though,
Yes.
right? And I think that's like part of the neurodiversity affirming movement is like we're not saying those are bad tools. We're just
Right.
saying let's expand the toolbox a little. Like
Yes.
is that the only tool?
Yeah. And because sometimes I'll hear this, it's like you reflect on something, maybe a flirt after the flirt, or you're talking about it with a friend or like
Mhm.
your mom or dad or something like that. You're like, oh my gosh, I think they were flirting, or were they being
Yeah.
nice? I'm not
Yeah.
sure. If you're
Yeah.
having that experience, just yeah, I understand, but it's like come back to you, and ultimately it's how did you feel
Yeah.
in that experience? Did you feel a
Yeah.
connection? Were you feeling some energy? Is this someone you maybe want to see again? Do you think you
Mhm.
will see him again if it's at something like, a class, or maybe something you're doing consistently, the gym or something like
Yeah.
that? So don't feel like this was your one and only chance to see this person or catch a flirt.
Yeah.
Maybe set yourself up like, hey, this was so much fun talking, I can't wait to see you next week.
Mhm.
Or if you want to explore something, you could always ask for their number, something like that, express interest in grabbing lunch, coffee, dinner.
Yeah,
So
totally.
yeah, taking those a little bit of action can also just help you be more intentional with the
Mhm.
experience that you ultimately want to have, because we're not mind readers or body language
Mhm.
experts. We could analyze a flirt all day
Yeah.
long and
All
probably
day
come
long.
up with a different a different ending every time.
Yeah. Exactly. And someone else might be like, they were flirting and
Yeah.
maybe they didn't even know that they were, right?
Yeah.
Or I think too, we can think about it as like maybe that's a way to make the connection, right?
Mm.
Like it's a way to kind of have an in. It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean you're saying it has to go any certain place, right?
Yeah.
You're just saying like, let's
Absolutely.
open the door a little bit to this
Absolutely.
connection.
Mm. I want to ask you now about masking, because this question came through a couple times. So, how that may look in flirting and in dating, just, yeah, maybe giving a couple of examples of masking.
Yeah. So yeah, masking. I think I told you because I like research this stuff so much. Sometimes I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, don't give the nerdy version. Give the like
You can
version
give
people
the
will get.
nerdy version.
Masking falls under this category of camouflaging. Camouflaging is masking, compensation, and assimilation. I can link an
Okay.
article to this as well. All of
Okay.
that to say, like masking is one way that people like kind of camouflage.
Mm,
And masking would be kind of like how do I fly under the radar, if you will, right? Or how do I kind of
okay.
like blend in with
Blend in.
everyone?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do I like not stick out? Also, there's that it might be more passive, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes there's times that we're being a little bit more active in that. Like, how do I make myself appear really sociable because I know people like that? Or how do I make myself
Mm,
appear really funny? How do I
hmm.
compensate for maybe ways that I might feel like insecure or traits that I have, characteristics I have that are
Yeah.
I know are not socially acceptable?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like humor I think can be a really like a way that you compensate a lot. That's a way
Definitely.
I compensate a lot.
Definitely.
And so I think masking can show up a lot as how do I experience social safety? How do I experience social
Uh,
connection? And
okay.
I've
Okay.
learned that in order to do that, I have to kind of mask or camouflage these parts of myself
Mm,
that if I showed up fully, I'm going to experience negative social consequences. And so I
mm.
think it's this really complex conversation because some of the rhetoric is like, well, just unmask everything, everywhere, all the time, right? I
Yeah.
think it's about learning. A lot of people have learned to mask really well. How do
Yeah.
we help you learn to use it as a tool so you can decide when you want to be doing it or not? Because
Yeah.
also it's kept you safe, right? It's like the your little
Absolutely.
safety blanket. It's the thing that has kept you safe. Doesn't mean you need to use it though with people that you are safe with, right? How can we help you
Mm,
start to unmask around people who have shown you that they're safe and they want you to show up?
okay. That's really helpful. We're going to stay there for a moment, because now I'm like the question that's coming to mind is how can we practice self-awareness and also self-compassion around masking? Because
Yeah.
I agree with you. I don't think it's the right thing to do to just say in every situation, unmask, right? Like that may not be ugh, the best advice all the time. And so,
Mm-hmm.
but how can we be with our experience of masking, lean into our strengths, and also not have this experience where we feel like we're not being our true self, or somehow we're
Yeah,
being inauthentic, right? I feel like that's an
totally.
experience I hear sometimes.
Totally. Yeah. You show up to a date or, to wherever, and you're showing up as this like masked version of yourself because you've learned like, this is how I feel accepted socially, or this is what's safe for me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to experience negative social consequences like being ostracized or being like pointed out as like, oh my gosh, that's so weird, why are you doing that thing? And so you kind of learn like, okay, here's how I have to show up. But I think the beauty of like doing the work to learn how to unmask is then you at least have a choice. And you're saying like, oh, I'm choosing to show up in this way.
Okay.
Because I know that's like what's required of me in this place. Or might keep me safe in this place.
Yes. All right. That's really helpful. And if you feel like you have some odd or strange behaviors or habits, I would say maybe lean into those every now and then. I definitely have some stimming habits like I do at the store. And like I do this weird, like this thing with my gloves. I don't know how to describe it visually, but I sort of take them off so the fingers are loose. And I like slap my gloves together and I just walk up and down the aisles. I go, stimming, I'm stimming again.
Yeah. Yes. But, you know, I think too, like when you're more unmasked, then you're going to attract people who say like, hey, I know what that is, right? Like who get it. Yeah. I think like showing up as yourself, you figure out the people who like that flavor. And then they can, those are the people you want to attract. I think sometimes with masking, people end up in attracting people that they're like, that's actually not the kind of person that's a good fit for me. Right. They're attracted to the masked version of myself. And then when I am unmasked, all of a sudden they're like, ooh, I don't know how I feel about like this real you.
Okay. That's really helpful because there are going to be situations where you're looking for more social cohesion. You want to blend in, so to speak. You want to fit in. And I get that completely. And then there's going to be a lot of opportunities, even on dates. You're flirting, right? You're looking to develop connections and relationships where we want to, take the mask off and just do
totally. But I mean, I think it's beautiful. You have a workplace where you're able to kind of like be yourself. Some people have workplaces where they have to like put up this really professional front. And so when we talk about safety and masking, it's really career-wise socially advantageous for you to do that, right? It also comes at a cost. And that's the other part of it we have to recognize is that like the number one contributor to autistic burnout is masking. And so you have to like that developing that awareness is also saying this is taking a certain amount of energy from you. Like I talked about earlier. So okay.
That's helpful. You come on to Trader Joe's. We will stim together. We will unmask.
I mean, I could totally see a lot of Trader Joe's employees being neurodivergent. I would when I go in, I'm like, oh yeah.
I would say it might be the norm.
That is the norm
there. Just through conversation, not even observation, but through conversation, there are many neurodiverse people on the staff.
Totally.
All right. Mady, we got to get into, because I got some questions here, and this was on our outline today.
Yes.
Meeting people.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Did you, out of curiosity, did you get people who like from Instagram or other places asked you about this question as well? Is this a question that you get a lot?
Yes, I get a lot. And specifically geared to meeting people in person, because I feel like I hear more generally a burnout with dating apps or just a desire to transition off them. Oh, this isn't really working for me. Or I'm just over it. And I feel like I definitely hear it from neurodiverse daters because you're trying to read between the lines and interpret context and cues from a text, from a profile, from a picture. And you're going to miss so much information when there's only, a 2D version of someone and it's words on a screen. So yeah.
Totally. I think there's just like the real struggle or imbalance of like, I think the hard part is some people are like, let's meet in person right away. Right. Some people are like, let's chat for a long time. I think it gets complicated when we bring in like intersectionality of identity for like a lot of women, someone who's like, let's meet up right away. I'm like immediately like thinking about my own sense of safety. Right. So there's like a lot of factors that go into it. And I think it's again, I think what we're coming to a lot of today is just that it's not a one size fits all. Right. And so I think the other thing that I like to normalize a lot of is that it's also okay to meet people online or to connect with people online. I think we've kind of said like, oh, those kinds of relationships are not as valid. Right. But for some people, like written communication is actually a much more comfortable form of communication as opposed to spoken communication. Right.
Yes.
I think it's looking at each individual and saying like, what are your specific needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
you are more comfortable in written communication, how can you start to convey that to people or find other people who also that's a good fit for? If you're more comfortable with like maybe even spending time together, like what we would call parallel play when we do play therapy, right? But like spending time together without necessarily having to have conversation. I think like, meeting people in general is a hard one that I hear a lot. I think people are tired of dating apps. Mm-hmm. I think that like, one of the things I mentioned earlier that kind of ties into this is like passionate areas of interest. And when mm-hmm. you're pursuing those, like mm-hmm. even finding like, okay, who are the people doing this thing I'm interested in my mm-hmm. city, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's also a lot of room to say, then you're finding, if you can pursue those passionate areas of interest, you kind of increase your chances of meeting somebody else. And when I was dating, I also just said yes a lot because I was like, well, this person might not be a match for me. Maybe they have a friend who is, or maybe their friend's friend is, or whoever, absolutely. Right? I think some of it, if you are wanting to meet people in person, is like doing the things that you're interested in, establishing relationships with people, and putting yourself out there, and then mm-hmm. giving yourself breaks when you need it after, you have a rejection or a heartbreak, but then getting back out there again.
Oh, that's so helpful. I'm glad you really validated the online experience mm-hmm. as well in this, because it may be written communication and the dating apps feels a little more easier or more natural, or it feels mm-hmm. like that's a good place to put your energy. That's fantastic. And then I love that we opened up talking about strengths. It's mm-hmm. like your natural curiosity, your inclination for connection, your ability mm-hmm. to ask questions is going to serve you, I think, so well in meeting people. And it can happen anywhere. One thing I find that really helps is decentering dating a little bit and taking the mm-hmm. pressure off yourself to enter mm-hmm. into a conversation and into a connection with the intention that, oh, I want this person to like me, or, oh, I mm-hmm. wonder if they like me back, or, oh, are mm-hmm. they flirting? Are they not? Oh, I want them to go on a date with me, or, oh, I want to follow them, or whatever. Reverse engineer it. Just start with that point of connection first. See how mm-hmm. you're both giving, receiving, sharing energy, attention, mm-hmm. maybe a compliment or two, right? Make eye contact for a second or two if you feel up for it, and then see what happens. I think right away, you're at least going to stand out as a person for just being interested and showing, just asking some questions, because a lot of people don't do that, or they go right to the physical. They go right to like, hey, you're hot, or you want to mm-hmm. go out, or something like that. So
which can feel threatening too, right? Or I think for some people it can be like, oh, so you're only interested in me because of this, right?
Exactly.
Like what I look like. So I think that's really valid. And I think to like my own, again, bringing this back to like my own personal dating philosophy,
mm-hmm,
but
mm-hmm.
things I've also found helpful with clients is like having the same standards for someone you're interested in dating that you would have for a friend, right? Like, would you be their friend? And if you wouldn't be their friend, like just to unpack and take a step back, I think also the thing that we have to talk about too is like what you're looking for. If you're looking for a long-term relationship, or you're mm-hmm. looking for something more short-term, mm-hmm. or you're looking for the kind of relational structure that's maybe non-traditional. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's like a romantic aspect of your relationship, but you meet your sexual needs elsewhere. Right. I think, not being clear about what you want, and then being clear about what you can reasonably expect from that person based off of what you want.
Okay. All right.
And that feels really important, right? Because if I'm talking about like, for example, like what I just mentioned, if you're kind of only looking for a hookup, some of those things might be different criteria, right? Maybe you don't need as much of that, like the things that sustain a relationship long term.
Yeah. Okay. Let's stay here for a moment, and how can the neurodiverse dater start to understand what some of their needs are? Mm-hmm. What maybe they're looking for if they don't have a lot of relationship experience, or maybe they do, but they've had one, maybe two relationships. How mm-hmm. can they start to determine what it is that's important to them?
Totally. This is a lovely question. I like to do a lot of like values-based work with my clients, and I think that can be really powerful. There's this card deck, the Lisa Congdon Know Your Values deck. Mm-hmm. And it's like essentially a deck, I think, of like 78, something like that, cards. And you sort through them and you go, the ones that matter a lot, the ones that don't matter that much, and the ones I don't care about. And you kind of try to like parse it down to like, I'll usually have people do like 10. And then from there, like, what are your top 3 values? So like for me, that might be like connectedness, social justice, community. right? And then how can I start to seek out people? Like, it's a values-based dating system, right? If
Okay.
I'm
I
looking for
love it.
something,
Yeah.
you have to figure out, what am I looking for first and foremost, and then how do I start to seek out people that align with my own values? What
Okay.
does their community look like, right? Do
Mm,
they also value connectedness? If they're
okay.
like waiting 3 days between texts, like, okay, we have different values. It doesn't have to be like about, well, they're avoidant and they don't respect my time and any of that. It can just be like, oh, hey, we have different values.
Okay.
I value maintaining connection and you don't, and so that's
Yeah.
not going to be a good fit.
Okay. That's
So
really,
that's what
really
I would
helpful.
say. I think, like, knowing your own values.
Those are definitely 3 of my values: community,
Yeah.
connectedness, and social justice. My
Yeah.
Libra right there.
Yeah.
You just described me. Yeah, that's so helpful, because if you do have a tendency to mask in dating, certainly in those initial stages, those first few dates, or maybe you've been inclined to people pleasing in the past, trying to make yourself super available, overextending yourself, saying yes because you want the connection. Ultimately, you want to feel liked and valued and like you're on the same page. And so maybe rushing into that a little bit, coming back to values and having a values-based dating approach, I think is just it's not going to steer you wrong. And then also what you said a moment ago, it's like, would you even want to be friends with this person in the first place?
Exactly. Yeah. I think that could, this is my bias. That could be good. Maybe sometimes you just want like a fun hookup or whatever, but I think it's good criteria across the board, right? Like for me, at least, I was like, I don't even want to give you the time of day if I wouldn't be friends with you, right? If I don't feel like you're a good friend, why would I think you'll make a good romantic partner in any capacity?
All right, Mady, let us get into a little bit about sensitivities.
Yeah.
Because this was definitely on our list here as we were setting up the conversation. One thing you mentioned was navigating sensory sensitivities for the neurodiverse dater. So yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, this is like such an interesting topic to me because I think, when I think about dating and like people's experiences on the app, it's usually like, oh, let's grab a coffee or a drink, right? And I think for like a lot of people, that kind of environment, a coffee shop, I mean, unless it's like a anomaly of a coffee shop or a really like quiet one, a lot of times there's like a lot of noise happening. They're calling out drink orders, they're making espresso shots, you can hear the other conversation over here. For me personally, if I'm in a place where I can hear any other conversation other than the one I am having, I cannot concentrate on the conversation I'm having. If I can hear like any other conversation, especially if it's like a high conflict one, I'm immediately like, so I think like acknowledging that there can be, even with like physically being in spaces for like a first date, there can be a lot of sensory sensitivities. There can be like loud noises, strong scents. There can be a lot of unpredictability in the environment. And a lot of that then takes away your energy and ability to like be present and show up as yourself. And so I think some of the value of knowing your own self as a sensory system and the things that are dysregulating to you, you can start to like accommodate yourself a little bit more and not feel ashamed about that.
Absolutely.
And I think it can also come up around like physical intimacy. So like, let's say you have you're really attracted to a person and you have a lot of like sensory sensitivities around smell and they have a certain cologne. It's not a bad smelling cologne in general, but to you, it's really just regulating. Right. And now all of a sudden, like, it's like nauseating and you're like, now I feel confused because I thought I liked this person and right. So like even thinking about smells, like that would be like the, broader version of it, but we can get to like all levels of physical intimacy is going to involve sensory experiences, right? Skin touching skin is a sensory experience. And so I think that's obviously going to bring up a lot of, if you have any sensory sensitivities, it's going to be activating.
Yeah, that's really good. And I can relate to the one about noise as well. I feel like I've more or less gotten a little bit better about that as I've gotten older, but noise for me has always been one of those sensory sensitivities. And also as someone that experiences a lot of anxiety, one thing that's really helped me is having the experiential or activity based date. And so like we're getting into the warmer months here for a lot of the world. Can you go to a farmer's market? Is there a hike, a park, somewhere public where you feel comfortable, where you feel safe? You're going to be in nature, outside, doing something, moving. It's going to be a little bit quieter, or at least you're going to be able to focus on just you and the other person, building this connection. And so I find if there's an experience, if there's something that you can do together, it might help if it's not something you've tried in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like finding something that like you're comfortable with rather than like what
Yeah.
would they like, right? But like
Yes.
what would I like?
Yeah.
I love an unconventional first date.
Uh-huh.
Even if it's like I did a lot of like FaceTime, I called them pre-screening calls. I'd be
Yes.
like, let's like
Yes. I
hop
love it.
on and we'll play iPhone whatever cup pong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or like let's play Mario Kart or whatever. Like
Yes.
kind of like that's so I think for me it was like also again around like safety. Is this
Mm-hmm.
person like someone I even can connect with virtually, and then we can transition that to in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think a lot like about taking the pressure off or not being like, wow, I feel like incompetent because I
Mm-hmm.
can't force myself to sit at a bar where it's loud
Yeah.
and noisy. And instead
Yeah.
being like you said, farmer's market. Do like
Love
a
it.
picnic day. Go to Trader Joe's together. Pick out a bunch of fun stuff and then
Heck
just like go to a park and try
yes.
them all and do a little taste test, right?
Oh,
Let's get fun and
yes.
unconventional.
Grab some grab and goes, make yourself a charcuterie board.
Yeah.
Yes. Come on to
Yeah, or
Trader
be like,
Joe's.
okay, let's each pick out 3 snacks we've never tried before, and
I
then we'll
love
like put
that.
them all out, and
Yeah.
and then you get to
That
include
was
like if you're a super taster or super smeller and sensory
yeah.
sensitive, the strength side of that is like
Yeah.
you're really perceptive. Then you're getting to engage your senses in a fun way too.
Oh, I love it. That was one of the best first dates I've ever had. The one that
Yeah.
always sticks out in my mind. This guy, he was so cute. I kind of wish that had worked out in some ways, but it was not going to.
Yeah.
But the first date, this was back in like Craigslist days, how long ago that was,
Mm.
pre-dating app and everything.
Yeah.
And his suggestion was we were going to meet at a park and we were going to have a picnic and we were going to bring our own lunches, but then on the date we were going to swap.
Oh, I love that. That's such
Yeah.
a fun idea.
It was so cool. And
Yeah.
like, I know some of the flirties are thinking, oh, what if I don't like what they make? Or what if it
Yeah.
smells weird or something
Yeah.
like that? Just go on the date.
Yeah.
Go on the date, right?
Bring backup snack,
Bring
right?
backup snacks.
You know, also
Look-
you don't have to like what they made, and then it's
No,
like,
you
you can
don't.
make it a fun conversation. You can
Yes,
be
you
like, "Oh
can.
my gosh, how wild! You didn't realize I was allergic to walnuts, and you brought a,
Yeah.
whatever banana bread with walnuts in it." How
Exactly.
funny.
Look
We
over
learned
there,
something
and
about
then
one another.
you're feeding the birds or the squirrels.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So yeah,
I
I think that's all good stuff. I also think the one other thing I'll mention is like I
Mhm.
got to a point in dating where it's like I'm just gonna start suggesting things I want to do. Like
yes.
I'm just gonna start suggesting like I've been wanting to try this restaurant. Let's go here because then at least at the end of the day I got to try something that
Absolutely.
I wanted to do and knock it
Yeah.
off the bucket list. So I think that's
That's-
also like thinking about another way to make dating less miserable if it's
Yes.
challenging at all for you.
I think so too. We got to get into this question now as, oh my God, this conversation, whoa, this is going by so quickly. But
I
I've got
know.
to ask you about RSD, rejection, sensitivity,
Yeah.
dysphoria. I think that's a topic or a concept a lot of the flirties listening will
Mhm.
have some familiarity with.
Yeah.
It seems like I oftentimes see RSD framed within the same conversation as neurodiversity, tying that to
Yeah.
ADHD and or
Mhm.
autism, but want to hear from you a little bit more about rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria.
So here's one of the things I want to start off by saying is that this is like a very real thing, and
Mhm.
that for the studies that they have done for people who experience rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, show that
Mhm.
people who experience this, like neurodivergent people who experience this, it is physically painful for them in their
Mm.
bodies,
Mm.
right? Like we're not
Yeah.
just talking like, ouch, that hurt my feelings. We're talking about like
Yeah.
it's this
okay.
visceral experience.
Uh-huh.
And I think it can be really challenging because it doesn't always have to be actual rejection. It could be perceived
Oh.
rejection, right?
Okay. Okay.
And I think that's what people are like really sensitive to or picking up on a lot. I think a lot about like the kinds of things that you and I have probably heard in dating of like, oh, this was great. We'll have to do it again, right? And then not
Yeah.
hearing back from them.
Yes.
It's like, you know, in that moment, you have a sense and you're like, oh no, but what they're saying is this. So I should just trust that because I've been
Yeah.
told like, trust what people say, whatever. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, I should have listened to my intuition. And then you're like second guessing yourself. And then you're like,
Mhm.
the next time somebody says that, and then maybe they do follow up, you're like, well, then I really can't trust myself. But knowing
Mm.
that like, it's not always sometimes it's actual rejection. That actually might be a little bit easier because at least then you're not stuck wondering what it was.
Yeah.
But I think like the perceived rejection is something that doesn't get talked about as much. That can be,
Okay.
and again, for a lot of people, the rejection, if you experience this, it's like physically painful to you in
Yeah.
your body.
Yeah.
Which if anyone's been through any kind of emotional pain that has
Mhm.
felt physical, that's quite a doozy.
Yeah. I've definitely been there, and I'm glad you brought this up because I think I want to start to end with this this experience that a lot of us will have out there dating where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this was so much fun. Like, let's go see that movie, or, oh, right, let's catch up and do this. And you might take it very literally as an
Mm-hmm.
expression of interest. Oh, we're going to do this thing. I better
Mm-hmm.
clear my calendar for Thursday night or Saturday morning or
Yeah.
whatever. But then it maybe doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
how can we navigate that experience where we perceive what someone says as interest? We think something's going
Mm-hmm.
to happen and then it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And, to complicate it even further, if we look
Mm-hmm.
at expectation sensitivity, which a lot of neurodivergent people experience, I
Oh,
experience this to an insane, like a very massive degree. This
okay.
idea that like I want to know what's going to happen and I want to know when, and when that gets thrown
Yeah.
off, I have a
Yeah.
huge meltdown around it, and
Okay.
then I feel a lot of shame, and then it's this huge spiral. And so I
Yeah.
think that's
Okay.
sometimes what's underpinning it is sometimes it's hard to discern, is it even because I like this person, or is it because like I just want to know what to reasonably expect?
Yeah.
And I think that can be part of discerning it. And then also like giving yourself permission to be honest, or
Mm,
giving yourself permission to be transparent. And
okay.
if you are interested in them, then just saying like, hey, I'm interested, following up because you said that you wanted to do XYZ again.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
that's changed, let me know, right? And then
Okay.
saying like, okay, I'm going to give myself a week, and if I don't hear back from them, then I'll let it
Right.
go. Or even following up and say, hey, just wanted to make sure, are you still interested or are you not? Totally cool either way, but just wanted to know. I think
Okay.
like kind of giving yourself the permission you need at times
Absolutely.
to get clarity when you can, but also to let go when you can't.
Absolutely. Okay. I think that's a really helpful approach because it's going to be an experience you're probably going to have out there
Totally.
dating. I just have, oh my gosh, I'm going to squeeze in one more question here
Please do.
talking about emotional regulation. I want to leave the
Yeah.
flirties with some tools, some tips, a strategy or
Mm-hmm.
two for those moments where they maybe start to feel overwhelmed. They're going
Mm-hmm.
into that spiral, perhaps you were just describing. Anxiety
Yeah.
is flaring. They feel like they've got their values right. They know what they're
Mm-hmm.
looking for, their intention. They're starting to unmask. And now there's sort of some uncertainty and they're in their head, perhaps. So
Yeah.
some ways to just practice emotional, regulation.
Yeah, totally. Well, one good one that I'm like doing right now as we're talking actually is
Hmm.
I have like a fidget toy that I've been squeezing this whole time.
Yeah.
This is like, again, this doesn't mean everyone should have a fidget toy, but this is a thing I found is emotionally regulating. I also
Okay.
have like my favorite tea here, right? This is
Yes.
emotionally regulating. I think it's about expanding your toolbox of things that bring you comfort or regulation.
Hmm.
That's like one of the steps as far as like really tangible things that you can do for yourself. And
Okay.
it's going to be different for everyone, but it's that like self-reflective, introspective work of like,
Mm.
what are the things that help me ground me in myself, bring me back
Yeah.
to myself when I'm
Yeah.
feeling overwhelmed.
Okay.
Maybe it's like a book, maybe it's a quote, maybe it's like in the moment having something to squeeze,
Yeah.
and then like these short-term things that you can do in the moment to bring yourself a little bit more comfort.
Yeah.
I also realized like I always have my fuzzy blankie. I also have that
Yeah.
right now, right? I'm getting myself comfy in my own body. But
Okay.
I think the other part of it is like, we talked a little bit about community. Who are the people who know you and who
Yes.
can speak truth into you? Like in those moments where you're having a hard time getting back to yourself, who
Hmm.
can be like, hey, I know you, right?
Hmm.
This is like what I'm seeing, or this is
Hmm.
who you are. And then not seeing that as like insecure to like reach out to those people, right?
Yes.
Like the
Okay.
number of times like in dating with my friends, I would be like,
Yeah.
I know this is like so silly, but here's what I'm thinking, or I'm spiraling here, right? And people who
Yeah.
can be like, yep, we know,
Hmm.
that's kind of your pattern, but here's what we see in you.
Yeah.
So I think that is the power of relationship and community too, is people who know you and can ground you in yourself.
Mm. Yeah, that's really, really helpful in your search for connection. If you're out there dating and maybe it's just it didn't go quite right or ended in a rejection, or you're having this experience. I hear sometimes feeling like you're too much, right? Don't want you
Mm-hmm.
to feel or think like you're too much. Come and lean on your connections. You can still create that connection and really lean into your friendships, your other
Mm-hmm.
relationships, your pets, right? The ways you're
Yeah.
going to co-regulate,
Mm-hmm.
enjoy a favorite food, a favorite experience, a comfort
Mm-hmm.
movie or show, a book, a podcast. And it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean it's necessarily going to replace sometimes this longing, this yearning we have for that romantic
Yeah.
connection, that partner. But recognizing that I may not have that right now doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
my life is lacking in all of these
Yeah.
other areas.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry. I have to add one more that
Yes.
I think can be helpful.
Okay.
if you're like dating and doing the apps and all of that, and you're kind of like having this experience of like connecting with people and then it doesn't work out and that's like really painful to you, I think it can also help sometimes to have some kind of ritual, right? Like when I have a thing that like doesn't work out, like my ritual was like I had this playlist that was real emo and made me really sad, and I would go and I would get a Chick-fil-A milkshake and I would cry, and then I would drive around the block, and then I would get home and I'd be like, okay, I've purged it, I've let it go, you know? But whatever that ritual is, maybe it's like something that's a little bit more spiritual for you. But I think it can be really helpful to have these rituals of like, how do I let go of that which is not meant to be for me? Even when I know that's true, but it still hurts.
Yeah. Really, really helpful. After you have your milkshake and your emo drive, come to my yoga class.
Yes, exactly. Oh, that sounds like a dream.
We'll do a little yoga and then some flirting. How about that?
Yeah, and then, you know, flirt, which you can do with your friends too, right? Flirty energy of like connection, of just like, you know, I think it doesn't always have to be like romantic. And that's, I love that we touched on that. Let's romanticize our platonic relationships.
Oh my gosh.
Like you and I had such a meet cute, a platonic meet cute, you know? Let's romanticize our platonic relationships. Yeah, and look where it led us to, right?
When in doubt, flirt it out.
Yes, I love it.
Oh, new catchphrase.
Yes, when in doubt, flirt
for
it out.
Us.
I was just going to say, you need that on a t-shirt. We need to get some merch for you.
Merch is coming. In the background, I'm working very diligently on making that happen here in 2025. Bags, mugs, t-shirts, hats, everything. There needs to be flirt merch.
Yeah, love it. Maybe even like some matches to signify people finding their match.
Oh my gosh. Let me add that to the flirt merch list. Matches. I love it. Oh my gosh. Mady, Snyder, this has been an incredible conversation. It's gone by so quickly. The only other question I really have is I want to send the flirties your way, to your website, to some of the resources we teased in the beginning. So where can they find you, follow you, and maybe perhaps explore a diagnosis for themselves?
Totally. Yeah. So my website is just my first name, last name, MadySnyder.com. And I'm sure you'll have that linked below.
Yes.
And then you can find me on Instagram at Couchspace. And we can link that as well. And then, you know, there's a couple other things we talked about today, so I can send those over to you. But like I've mentioned, my website has a ton of helpful information. Great. People are welcome to like reach out and email me or DM me if you ever have questions. I love connecting people to resources, and I'm just constantly holding like a wealth of resources in my mind, and, you know, have 1,012 documents.
Yes.
So yes, I think, don't hesitate to reach out if this is something you have questions about. And I'm also, I know, you know, a lot of wonderful neurodivergent therapists all over the country and even internationally. So if you're listening somewhere else and you want to get connected, all it takes is kind of reaching out.
Well, thank you so much. I will definitely have your website and Instagram linked in the show notes below. I think an article or two will have linked there as well. I love that you, so making yourself available just to help the flirties, connect them more deeply to themselves with a therapist or practitioner, because you don't have to go through any of this alone.
No, you really don't.
My gosh, this was amazing. Mady, thank you so much for being on Flirtations today.
Yes, thank you for having me. This was so much fun, and I'm sure we could have talked for another 3 hours.
Oh my gosh. I know we were like boom, 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 going through everything, but I think we created a really wonderful resource for the neurodivergent flirties.
Yes.